Old Eugene leaned over the fence and told me he had seen shadows in my garden 3 nights running. Flashlights near the cellar door. I told him it was probably raccoons. 2 days later, my wife was in the ICU with poison in her blood. And when I crawled into the tunnel beneath my house and watched the camera footage, I saw my own daughter's face staring back at me. Calm, cold, planning the exact same thing she had done to her mother 6 years ago. But I need to go back to the beginning. Back to that Tuesday evening, when everything I believed about my family started to fall apart. Thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, I would love to know where you are watching from. Leave a quick comment and share your city or country. Stories like this one invite us to reflect on trust, family, and the unseen layers of everyday life. My name is Frank Aldridge, 71 years old, retired Chief Inspector, Savannah Metropolitan Police Department, 32 years on the force. I have seen things that would keep most people awake for the rest of their lives. Home invasions, cold cases, confessions that made seasoned detectives leave the room. I thought I had seen it all. I was wrong. My wife Diane and I live in a Victorian house on East Charlton Street in Savannah, Georgia. 120 years old. 3 stories, wraparound porch, original hardwood floors, and a garden out back where live oaks drop Spanish moss like curtains. When we bought it 8 years ago, I thought it would be the last house I would ever live in. The kind of place where you sit on the porch, watch the fireflies, and feel like the world has finally stopped asking things of you. Behind the garden, past the magnolia tree, there is an old cellar door built into the ground. Heavy iron hinges, a padlock that takes a skeleton key. The cellar connects to the basement through a narrow stone staircase, and below that, if you know where to look, there is a tunnel. Built during the Civil War, 1862, lined with hand-laid brick, running 40 feet underground and coming out behind the garden shed near the back fence. I found it 2 years ago during a plumbing repair. The contractor hit a hollow section of wall, and behind it was a wooden door so old the hinges had turned to rust. I walked the full length with a flashlight. It smelled like wet earth and history. I told Diane about it. She laughed and said it was the most Savannah thing she had ever heard. I never told anyone else. Only 2 people had the key to that cellar door. Me and my daughter Caroline. That Tuesday evening, I was watering the rose bushes along the back fence when Eugene's voice came from the other side. Eugene Hartwell, 78. Retired history professor, Savannah State University. He had lived next door for 23 years. The kind of neighbor who noticed everything. Not because he was nosy, but because 40 years of teaching the Civil War had made him a man who paid attention to details. Frank. His voice was low, urgent. He was gripping the fence rail with one hand. The other held a glass of sweet tea tilting sideways, dripping onto his shoes. Eugene, you are spilling your tea. He looked down, frowned, set the glass on the fence post, and leaned closer. I need to tell you something. 3 nights in a row, after midnight, someone has been coming through your garden gate. I have seen flashlights near the cellar door. Last night, I saw 2 people go inside. They were down there for over an hour. I stared at him. The evening air was thick with jasmine and warm earth. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Did you see their faces? Too dark. One was carrying a bag. The other had a laptop. I could see the screen glow when they opened the cellar door. I thanked him, told him I would look into it. He squeezed my arm the way he always did when he was worried, and went back to his porch. I walked to the cellar door. The padlock was in place, locked. But I crouched down and looked closer, the way 32 years of crime scenes had taught me. Not at the obvious things, at the edges. There, around the keyhole. Fresh scratches in the brass, tiny, almost invisible, but unmistakable if you knew what to look for. Someone had inserted a key that did not quite fit. A copy, made from an impression or a photograph. The kind that works but leaves tool marks on the original lock. I ran my finger over the scratches. Recent. Days old, not weeks. I stood slowly, knees aching, and looked back at my house. Warm light spilling from the kitchen window, Diane making dinner, jazz drifting through the screen door. Only 2 people had that key. Me and Caroline. And I had not been down there in months. I went back inside and washed my hands at the kitchen sink. Diane was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of shrimp and grits, humming something low and familiar. She looked over her shoulder and smiled. "Everything okay out there?" "Fine. Just talking to Eugene about his azaleas." The lie came out smooth. 32 years of interrogation rooms had taught me how to control my face, my voice, the tiny muscles around my eyes that give a man away when he is not telling the truth. I hated using that skill on my wife. But until I understood what those scratches on the lock meant, I was not going to worry her. Diane Aldridge, 63 years old, former pediatric nurse at Memorial Health. She had retired 2 years before I did, and since then, she had filled the house with plants, crossword puzzles, and the smell of whatever she was cooking that evening. She was kind in a way that was not soft. She had spent 30 years holding sick children and telling their parents the truth, even when the truth was terrible. That takes a spine made of iron. We had been married 8 years. She was not my first wife. My first wife was Rose. Rose Aldridge. The woman who built everything good in my life. We were married for 31 years. She ran the household, raised Caroline, volunteered at every school event, and somehow still found time to bake peach cobbler every Sunday afternoon. The whole house would smell like brown sugar and cinnamon, and Caroline would sit on the kitchen counter licking the spoon while Rose sang along to the radio. Rose died 6 years ago. The doctors called it progressive organ failure. Her kidneys went first, then her liver. They said it was rare, but not unheard of in a woman her age. She was 64. I held her hand in the hospital for 11 days before she let go. She squeezed my fingers 3 times right before the end. 3 squeezes. Our code since the very first year of our marriage. I love you. After Rose passed, I could not stay in the old house. Too many echoes. I sold it, moved to Savannah, and a year later, I met Diane at a fundraiser for the foundation, the Rose Aldridge Hope Foundation. I started it the month after Rose died. It supports children in foster care, helps families adopt, funds after-school programs in low-income neighborhoods. Rose would have loved it. Caroline manages the finances. She has been the foundation treasurer since day one. Caroline Aldridge, my daughter. 37 years old, smart, organized, efficient. She married Nathan Webb 3 years ago. Nathan works in information technology, cybersecurity consulting. He is quiet, polite, the kind of man who shakes your hand firmly and looks you in the eye. They live 15 minutes away in a townhouse on Abercorn Street. Caroline calls me every Sunday evening. She brings Diane vitamins every month, a special blend she orders from some organic company online. She handles the foundation books with precision. She visits for dinner at least twice a month, always bringing wine or dessert. She kisses my cheek when she arrives and squeezes my hand when she leaves. She is, by every visible measure, a devoted daughter. I sat down at the kitchen table while Diane served dinner. We ate. We talked about the weather, about the new restaurant on Broughton Street, about whether the Savannah bananas would have a good season. Normal things. Safe things. After dinner, I washed the dishes while Diane read on the couch. At 9:30, she kissed my forehead and went to bed. I told her I would be up soon. I did not go up soon. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark for over an hour. The house was quiet. The only sound was the old grandfather clock in the hallway ticking off seconds, and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I thought about those scratches. In 32 years of police work, I had learned that evidence does not lie. People lie. Witnesses lie. Suspects lie. Even good people lie when they are scared or cornered. But physical evidence tells you exactly what happened, if you know how to read it. Those scratches told me 3 things. First, someone had a copy of the cellar key. Second, the copy was imperfect, meaning it was made quickly, probably from a wax impression or a photograph of the original. Third, whoever made it had used it multiple times. The scratches were layered. Older marks underneath, fresher ones on top. Multiple visits. Over days, maybe weeks. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Caroline's number. Her last text was from Sunday evening. "Love you, Dad. See you next week. Bringing Diane her vitamins." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I put the phone down, turned off the kitchen light, and climbed the stairs to bed. Diane was already asleep, breathing slow and steady. I lay beside her in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me the way old houses do. Creaking, sighing, holding its secrets. I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe Caroline had lent the key to a contractor. Maybe Nathan needed access for some repair I had forgotten about. Maybe it was nothing. But 32 years of reading crime scenes had taught me something else. When your gut tells you something is wrong, it usually is. And my gut was screaming. Outside, the Savannah night was thick and warm. A mockingbird sang from the magnolia tree, and somewhere beneath my house, in a tunnel built 160 years ago by men who understood that danger sometimes comes from the people closest to you, the truth was waiting. I just did not know yet how much it would cost me to find it. 2 days passed. Wednesday was quiet. Caroline texted me a photograph of a sunset from her office window with a heart emoji. Nathan sent a polite message about a Braves game he thought I might enjoy. Normal. Ordinary. Thursday morning changed everything. 7:12. I was at the kitchen table reading the Savannah Morning News. Diane was at the counter pouring coffee. She had already taken her morning vitamins, the ones Caroline brought every month. 3 capsules lined up next to her water glass the way she always arranged them. She picked up her mug, turned toward me, and it slipped. It hit the tile and shattered. Coffee splashed across the floor. Diane grabbed the counter with both hands, knuckles white. "Frank." Her voice was thin. "Something is wrong." Her face had gone gray. Not pale, gray, like wet cement. Her eyes were wide but unfocused. Sweat beaded on her forehead even though the kitchen was cool. I caught her as her knees buckled, lowered her to the ground, one hand cradling her head, the other reaching for my phone. Her pulse was racing under my fingertips, irregular, skipping beats. I dialed 911, gave the address. 6 minutes, they said. I held Diane on the kitchen floor and counted every second. The paramedics arrived in 5, started an IV, checked vitals, loaded her onto a stretcher. One of them asked if Diane was on any medication, blood pressure pills, and vitamins, daily vitamins her daughter gives her. At Memorial Health, they wheeled her into the emergency room. I sat in the waiting area staring at a television I could not hear, surrounded by strangers with their own emergencies. At 9:45, Dr. Henry Marsh came out, 56 years old, my physician for 7 years, and before that, Rose's oncologist during a cancer scare. The kind of doctor who sat down when he talked to you and did not rush. He sat next to me. His face told me everything before his mouth did. Frank, we ran a full toxicology panel. Your wife has thallium sulfate in her bloodstream. I knew what thallium was. Every homicide detective knows. The poisoner's poison. Colorless, odorless, tasteless. It dissolves in liquid, hides in capsules. Symptoms mimic a dozen common illnesses. By the time most doctors think to test for it, the damage is done. How much? Enough to be dangerous but not fatal. The levels suggest repeated low-dose exposure over several weeks. Someone has been giving this to her gradually, Frank. Deliberately. The word sat between us like a stone. Deliberately. My mind was already working. 32 years of homicide investigation does not shut off because you are in a hospital instead of a precinct. Low-dose exposure over weeks. A delivery method she would not notice. Something she takes daily. Something she trusts. The vitamins. The capsules she takes every morning, I said. Could someone put thallium inside them? Henry nodded slowly. Easily. Thallium sulfate is a fine white powder. Open a capsule, add a small amount, close it. She would never taste the difference. Those vitamins came from Caroline. Every month, like clockwork. A devoted daughter bringing her stepmother organic health supplements with a smile and a kiss on the cheek. I drove home, walked into the kitchen, stepped over the dried coffee stain on the floor, and picked up the brown glass bottle on the counter. Organic Daily Wellness Complex. Professional label. Expensive looking. 23 capsules remaining. Each one potentially a small dose of death. I sealed it in a plastic bag and drove it back to the hospital. Then I sat in my truck in the parking lot and thought. The obvious answer was to call the police. But I had been the police for 32 years. I knew exactly what would happen. They would bring Caroline in. She would deny everything. Her lawyer would demand evidence. The investigation would crawl. And if she had partners, if this was bigger than one person, they would scatter. Destroy evidence. Disappear. I had seen it happen too many times. You catch the hand that holds the knife, but the person who sharpened it walks free. No, not yet. I needed the whole picture first. Every player, every motive, every connection. Then I would bring it all down at once. I called Henry. Keep Diane at the hospital. Do not discharge her. And I need a favor. Move her to your private clinic under a different name. Cash. No insurance. No digital trail. A pause. Frank, what is going on? Someone is poisoning my wife. Until I know who else is involved, I need her hidden. Another pause. I will arrange it within the hour. I hung up and looked at the vitamin bottle in the plastic bag on the passenger seat. A gift from my daughter. Every month, without fail. I had spent my entire career hunting this kind of evil in other people's families. The slow kind, the patient kind. The kind that smiles at you across the dinner table while it measures out the next dose. Now it was in mine, Friday morning, 4:12. I did not sleep Thursday night. I sat in the kitchen with a legal pad and a pencil and made a list. Not a list of suspects, not a list of theories. A list of equipment. 32 years in law enforcement taught me that the difference between knowing the truth and proving the truth is measured in camera angles and timestamps. By 6 a.m., I had driven to 3 different stores across 2 counties. I paid cash at each one. No receipts, no loyalty cards, no credit trail. I bought 6 covert cameras, a smoke detector housing with a pinhole lens for the kitchen ceiling, a wall clock with a wide-angle sensor for the hallway, a picture frame with a micro camera for the living room, a bookend unit for the office shelf, a thermostat cover with a motion-activated lens for the upstairs hallway, and a weatherproof garden camera disguised as a motion sensor light for the shed facing the back gate. I installed all 6 between 7 a.m. and noon, mounted them in existing fixtures so nothing looked new, synced them to a single feed on my laptop through an encrypted local network. No cloud, no external server. Everything stored on an external hard drive that I could carry in my jacket pocket. Each camera had motion detection, night vision, and a battery backup good for 72 hours. Enough time to see who was using that copied key. At 1 p.m., I sent 2 messages. The first to Caroline. Heading to Charleston for a few days. Old friend from the academy is retiring. Back Thursday or Friday. Love you, Dad. The second to Eugene on the burner phone. New number. Watch the back garden tonight. Do not call unless you see something. Then I packed. Laptop, charger, external drive, both phones, flashlight, water bottles, 4 granola bars, a wool blanket, and Rose's leather photo album. I do not know why I took the album. I told myself it was because I might need something to do in the dark. That was a lie. I took it because wherever I was going, I needed her with me. The tunnel entrance was in the cellar, behind the wine rack that I had built in 2006. The rack swung outward on a concealed hinge that Rose and I had installed together one Saturday afternoon while Caroline was at summer camp. Rose had called it our secret passage. I called it a structural liability. We were both right. The tunnel itself was a relic from the Civil War. Hand-laid brick, reddish-brown, worn smooth by 160 years of groundwater seepage. Roughly 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall. I had to duck at 2 points where the ceiling sagged. The total length was approximately 40 feet, running from the cellar northwest under the garden to an exit shaft beneath the garden shed. The brickwork was remarkable for its age. Whoever built it understood that a tunnel is only as good as its drainage, and the slight downward grade toward the shed allowed water to flow away from the house foundation. 2 ventilation shafts ran vertically from the tunnel ceiling to the main house. The first connected to the kitchen floor vent, the second to the living room baseboard register. Both were original construction, narrow enough to be invisible from inside the house, but wide enough to carry sound faintly downward. I had discovered this by accident years ago when I heard Rose humming in the kitchen while I was inspecting the tunnel walls for moisture damage. There was also a secondary access point I had found during that same inspection. A narrow vertical shaft at the far end of the tunnel, opposite the shed exit, that rose approximately 12 feet and opened into the back wall of the upstairs linen closet. The opening was hidden behind a false panel that looked like the closet's original plaster. Rose and I had cleaned it out and installed a simple ladder of iron rungs set into the brick. We never used it. Rose said it made her nervous. I tested it once a year to make sure the rungs held. They always did. It was my insurance policy against a house with 1 staircase and an old man's knees. I set up the command post at the midpoint of the tunnel, where the 2 ventilation shafts converged. Folding table from the garage. Folding chair, laptop, external drive, power extension cord running from the cellar outlet through the wine rack opening. I taped the cord flat against the tunnel floor so it would not catch a foot in the dark. At 9 p.m., I opened the laptop. 6 feeds, 6 angles. Kitchen ceiling, hallway clock, living room frame, office shelf, upstairs thermostat, garden shed. My house laid bare in 6 rectangles of gray-green night vision. At 11:08, the house was silent. At 11:14, the garden camera detected motion. 2 figures walked through the back gate, through the gap in the azalea hedge, and moved toward the cellar door. They did not use flashlights. They knew the path. The 6 eyes were open, and so were mine. The 2 figures moved through the garden in single file. The one in front was smaller, quicker, confident in the dark. The one behind was taller, broader, carrying a laptop bag over one shoulder and what looked like a canvas tote in the other hand. They reached the cellar door. The smaller figure crouched, produced a key, and opened the padlock in one smooth motion. No fumbling, no hesitation. They had done this before. The garden camera caught them as they descended, and when the taller figure turned sideways to fit through the narrow opening, the screen glow from a phone in his jacket pocket lit his face for half a second. Nathan Webb, my son-in-law, which meant the smaller figure was Caroline, my daughter, my only child. Walking into my cellar at 11:14 on a Thursday night with a laptop bag and a key she was never supposed to have copied. I switched to the hallway camera. Waited. 2 minutes later, a faint light appeared at the top of the basement stairs, coming from below. They had turned on a lamp down there. I pressed my ear to the left ventilation shaft. Footsteps on concrete. The scrape of a chair. The click of a laptop opening. Then Caroline's voice, muffled but clear enough through the iron grate. Did you? Nathan's voice. All of them. Foundation accounts, quarterly reports, the asset summary from October. I switched back to the laptop. The cameras did not cover the basement interior. I had not anticipated needing one down there. But the ventilation shaft gave me audio, and the hallway camera showed me when they came and went. It was enough for now. For the next 47 minutes, I listened. They spoke in fragments. Numbers, account names, routing codes. Nathan read figures aloud while Caroline typed. I heard the words transfer, offshore, shell company, and signature authorization. I heard Nathan say, "The old signature scan works perfectly. She will never notice the difference." And I heard Caroline laugh quietly and reply, "He signs whatever I put in front of him. He trusts me. He trusts me." My hand tightened on the edge of the folding table. The aluminum bit into my palm. I forced myself to breathe. Slow in, hold, slow out. The way I had trained myself during 32 years of interrogations when a suspect said something that made me want to reach across the table. At 12:01, the basement light went off. Footsteps on the stairs. The hallway camera caught them moving toward the back door. Caroline locked the cellar from outside. They slipped through the garden gate and disappeared into the dark. I sat in the tunnel for a long time after that. The laptop screen glowed in front of me. 6 empty rooms. My house, silent and dark, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. My daughter and her husband were using my basement as a base of operations to steal from the foundation. From Rose's foundation, the charity I had built in my dead wife's name. I reached for the photo album. I do not know why. My hands moved before my brain gave permission. The leather was soft and worn, the edges rounded from years of handling. Rose had made it for my 50th birthday. She had spent weeks collecting photographs, arranging them chronologically, writing captions in her careful handwriting beneath each one. I opened it to the first page. Caroline, 3 days old, wrapped in a yellow blanket in Rose's arms at the hospital. Rose's face was exhausted and radiant. I remembered that day. I remembered the weight of Caroline in my hands when the nurse passed her to me. 7 pounds 4 ounces. She fit in the crook of my arm like she had been designed for it. I turned the page. Caroline at 4. This one stopped me. She was in the hospital. Pneumonia. Her small body was dwarfed by the bed, tubes running to her arm, a heart monitor beeping beside her. Her face was pale and her eyes were half closed. Rose sat in the chair next to the bed, holding Caroline's hand, her own face drawn and gray from 3 nights without sleep. I was not in the photograph, because I was the one who had taken it. But I remembered exactly where I had been standing, right beside the door, wearing the same clothes I had worn for 2 days because I had refused to leave the hospital. The nurses brought me coffee. The doctors told me to go home and rest. I did not move. On the 3rd night, Caroline's fever broke. She opened her eyes, looked at me, and whispered, "Daddy, I am thirsty." I held a cup of water to her lips with hands that shook so badly I spilled half of it on the blanket. She was so small, so fragile. I promised myself that night that I would never let anything hurt her, that I would stand between her and the world for as long as I had breath in my body. I closed the album. On the laptop screen, the house was dark and empty. The kitchen camera showed the counter where Diane's vitamins had sat that morning. The hallway camera showed the basement door, closed and ordinary. And somewhere above me, through brick and earth and 160 years of history, the grandfather clock struck 1. The girl in the photograph had smiled at me with her mother's eyes. The woman on the camera screen was stealing everything her mother had built. And I sat 40 feet underground, holding both versions of my daughter in my hands, trying to understand how one had become the other. Friday morning. I woke on the narrow cot I had set up in the tunnel alcove, my back stiff and my neck locked at an angle that would have made a chiropractor wince. The laptop screen was still glowing. All 6 cameras showed an empty house. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows on screen 1, casting long golden rectangles across the tile floor. I sat up, drank half a bottle of water, and pulled the laptop closer. Caroline and Nathan had left the basement the night before, but they had not taken everything with them. The hallway camera showed the basement door slightly ajar. They had been careless or confident. Probably both. I could not go up there. Not yet. If Caroline was watching the house, if she drove by to check, an open curtain or a moved object would tell her someone was home. I had to work with what the cameras gave me. I switched to the office camera. My desk was visible in sharp detail. The foundation files I kept in the second drawer were slightly out of alignment. Most people would never notice. But I had organized those files myself, edge to edge, color-coded tabs facing left. Now 2 of the folders were rotated, tabs facing right. Someone had pulled them out, opened them, and put them back in a hurry. I zoomed in. The camera resolution was high enough to read the folder labels. Foundation financial records, estate documents, quarterly reports. Then I saw it. On the desktop, near the keyboard, a thin layer of dust had been disturbed, not wiped clean, disturbed. Finger marks. Someone had laid papers flat on the desk, written or signed something, then picked them up. The dust showed the outline of a standard 8.5 by 11 sheet, and at the bottom right corner of that outline, where a signature line would be, the dust was smeared in a small arc. The motion of a hand signing a name. My name. 32 years of crime scenes had taught me to read dust the way most people read words. Every surface tells a story. You just have to know the language. I made notes in a small spiral notebook. Folders accessed. Dust pattern consistent with document signing. Probable forgery of foundation financial documents. Estimated scope unknown, but significant given the account numbers I had overheard the night before. I pulled up the Foundation's online banking portal on the laptop, logged in with my credentials. And there it was. Over the past 3 years, a series of transfers had moved funds from the Foundation's main account to 6 subsidiary accounts I had never authorized. The amounts were carefully calibrated. Never more than $25,000 at a time. Never on the same day of the month. Always accompanied by a line item that looked legitimate. Office supplies, event coordination, consulting fees. The total was $1.5 million. I stared at the number. 1.5 million. Stolen from a foundation named after my dead wife. By my daughter. I closed the banking portal and picked up the burner phone. Eugene answered on the second ring. His voice was groggy but alert. The voice of a man who had trained himself to wake up fast during 2 tours in Vietnam. It is Frank, I figured. Nobody else has this number. What time is it? 6:42. Good Lord. I have not been awake this early since 1971. What is happening? I told him. Not everything. Not yet. Just the basics. Someone is using my basement at night. I have cameras. I am in the tunnel, watching. I need you to be my eyes outside. Note every car that comes and goes. Every person who approaches my property. Times and descriptions. A pause. Then Eugene's voice, dry as Georgia dust. So let me get this straight. You are living in a Civil War tunnel underneath your own house, watching spy cameras on a laptop, and you want me, a 78-year-old history professor with a bad hip and bifocals, to be your field operative. I need a lookout, Eugene, not a field operative. Frank, the last time I did surveillance was 1968 in a rice paddy outside Da Nang. I was 20 years old and I could still touch my toes. Can you see my garden gate from your bedroom window? You know I can. Then you are qualified. Another pause. I could hear him pouring coffee. Fine. But if I get shot, I am haunting you for eternity. Nobody is getting shot. That is exactly what my sergeant said in Da Nang. He was wrong too. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Eugene had that effect. 40 years of lecturing undergraduates had given him a timing that most comedians would envy. But underneath the humor, I heard the steel. He was in. No questions. No conditions. I will check in every few hours on this phone, I said. Keep it charged. Keep it close. Understood. And Frank? Yeah. Be careful down there. Tunnels have a way of making a man feel invisible. But you are not. I know. I hung up and turned back to the cameras. The house was still empty, still quiet. Morning sun climbing higher through the kitchen windows. Then, on screen 3, something caught my eye. The living room camera. The chandelier above the dining table. I had walked past that chandelier 1,000 times. Crystal drops, brass frame, 8 bulbs. Diane kept it polished. But now, in the angled morning light, I could see something I had never noticed before. A small dark shape wedged between 2 crystal drops near the base. Too geometric to be dust. Too deliberate to be an accident. I zoomed in as far as the camera resolution allowed. The shape sharpened. A microphone. Professional grade. Smaller than a shirt button. Tucked into my chandelier like it had always belonged there. My daughter was not just stealing from me. She was listening. I spent the next 2 hours studying that microphone through the camera feed. The shape told me what I needed to know. Cylindrical, matte black housing. No visible antenna, which meant it transmitted on a short-range frequency to a receiver nearby, probably inside the house. The placement was deliberate. Wedged between the crystal drops at the base of the chandelier where the brass frame met the first ring of glass. Invisible from below. Nearly invisible from the side. You would have to be looking straight at it from above, at exactly the right angle, with exactly the right light to see it. This was not a $50 gadget from an online spy shop. This was professional equipment. The kind used in corporate espionage. The kind that required someone with technical knowledge to install and configure. Nathan, cybersecurity consulting. He would know exactly where to buy it, how to set it up, and how to position it for maximum audio capture. The dining room was the center of the house. From that chandelier, the microphone could pick up conversations in the kitchen, the hallway, and probably the living room. Every phone call I made at the table. Every conversation Diane and I had over dinner. They had been listening to us for God knows how long. My first instinct was to climb up there and rip it out. Crush it under my boot. But 32 years of police work overruled my anger. A surveillance device is only dangerous if the target does not know about it. The moment the target knows, the device becomes a weapon pointing the other way. I was going to use it. I waited until 1:30 in the afternoon. Camera feeds confirmed the house was empty. No cars on the street matching Caroline's or Nathan's vehicles, confirmed by a text from Eugene. All clear. Nobody in sight. Your street is deader than my lecture on the Battle of Chickamauga. I climbed up through the tunnel, through the basement, and into the house. Moved quickly, but carefully. Drew the living room curtains so no one could see inside from the street. Then I sat down at the dining room table, directly beneath the chandelier, and pulled out my regular phone. I dialed a number that did not exist. A disconnected line I had memorized years ago from an old case file. It would ring once, click, and go to dead air. But anyone listening would hear my side of the conversation. I cleared my throat and began. Malcolm, it is Frank. Listen, I have been thinking about the estate. I want to make some changes to the will. I spoke slowly, clearly, projecting my voice upward toward the chandelier, the way a man does when he is on a phone call and not thinking about who might be listening. I want everything to go to Diane. The house, the foundation assets, the savings accounts, all of it. Can you draw up the paperwork? I want to sign Monday morning. I paused, counted to 5. Let the silence play like the other person was responding. Yes, Monday. First thing. I want it done before the end of the week. I am meeting with the foundation board on Wednesday, and I want the new documents in place by then. Another pause. Thank you. I hung up, set the phone on the table, looked up at the chandelier. If Caroline was monitoring that microphone, she had just heard her father announce that he was cutting her out of the will in 4 days. Every dollar, every asset, gone. To Diane. That would accelerate things. Whatever she was planning, she would have to move before Monday. I had just shortened her timeline and given myself a deadline. I sat at the table for a moment longer, staring at the chair where Rose used to sit. Rose's chair. The one closest to the window. She liked the light. She would sit there on Saturday mornings with her coffee and the newspaper, reading the obituaries first because she said it reminded her to be grateful. Caroline used to tease her about it. Mom, that is so morbid. And Rose would smile and say, morbid is forgetting to tell people you love them while they are still here. I looked at that empty chair and remembered another day. Caroline's 16th birthday. I had saved for 4 months, picked up overtime shifts, skipped lunches. Rose knew what I was doing and never said a word, just smiled every time I came home late and kissed my cheek. On the morning of Caroline's birthday, I drove a 1991 Mustang convertible into the driveway. Cherry red, used, with 80,000 miles on it, but I had spent 2 weekends detailing it until the paint shone like glass. I tied a white ribbon around the steering wheel. Caroline came out the front door in her pajamas. She saw the car and stopped. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Then she ran. Barefoot across the porch and down the steps and threw her arms around my neck so hard she nearly knocked me over. You are the best dad in the world. She was crying, laughing and crying at the same time. I love you so much. Rose stood on the porch watching us. She caught my eye over Caroline's shoulder and squeezed her own hand 3 times against her chest. Our signal, even from 20 feet away. I love you. I closed my eyes at the dining room table, the memory so sharp it drew blood. Then I stood, walked back to the basement, descended into the tunnel, and sealed the door behind me. On the laptop screen, the house was empty again. The chandelier hung perfectly still. The microphone waited in the crystal like a spider in a web. I had given my daughter a reason to move faster, a reason to stop planning and start acting. I knew her. I raised her. I knew exactly how she would respond to the threat of losing everything. She would come for me. And when she did, I would be ready. Saturday morning, 10:07. The garden camera picked up a silver Audi pulling into the driveway, Caroline's car. I sat up on the cot and pulled the laptop closer. My pulse spiked, but I kept my hands still. 32 years. Control the body, the mind follows. Eugene's text came 12 seconds later. Silver Audi, your daughter, alone. No sign of Nathan. She got out of the car carrying her leather work bag, gray blazer, jeans, sunglasses pushed up on her head. She looked like she was stopping between errands. Casual, unhurried. She walked to the front door, produced her key, and let herself in. She did not call out, did not say Dad or anyone home. She already knew the house was empty. My Charleston text had done its job. I switched between cameras, tracking her movement through the house. Kitchen first. She went straight to the counter where Diane's vitamins sat, reached into her bag and pulled out an identical brown glass bottle. Same label, same size. She unscrewed the cap on the old bottle, tipped the remaining capsules into her palm, counted them, dropped them into a tissue, folded it, and slipped it into her jacket pocket. Then she opened the new bottle and poured its contents into the old one, screwed the cap back on, placed it on the counter in the exact same position, same angle, same distance from the water glass. I watched her hands through the kitchen camera. They did not shake, not once. Her movements were precise, practiced, mechanical, the way a surgeon handles instruments, the way a person does something they have done many times before. 32 years of reading suspects through one-way glass had given me a catalog of human behavior under stress. The innocent fumble. They hesitate. They look around. Their breathing changes. Their shoulders tighten. Caroline did none of those things. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her breathing was even. She did not glance toward the windows or check behind her. She moved through my kitchen with the calm efficiency of someone performing a routine task. Swapping poison into her stepmother's vitamin bottle, the way another person might water a plant. She has done this before, many times. This is not her first operation. The thought landed in my chest like a fist. She left the kitchen and walked down the hallway toward my office. I switched to the office camera. She opened the second desk drawer, the one with the foundation files, and pulled out the folder labeled Estate Documents. She set it on the desk, opened it, and photographed every page with her phone. Quickly, methodically. She was looking for the current will, the one I had pretended to change during my fake phone call the day before. She found it, read the first page. Her jaw tightened. Just barely. A micro-expression that lasted less than a second. But I caught it. She had heard the phone call through the chandelier microphone. She knew I was planning to sign new documents on Monday, and now she was confirming the current will to understand exactly what she stood to lose. She put the folder back, closed the drawer, and walked to the dining room. Stopped beneath the chandelier. Looked up. I watched her reach between the crystal drops and touch the microphone with 2 fingers. Checking the position. Checking the battery indicator. Satisfied, She pulled her hand back and adjusted a crystal drop that had shifted slightly. Then she walked to the front door, stepped outside, locked it behind her, and drove away. 17 minutes, start to finish. My daughter had walked into my home, replaced her stepmother's medication with poison, photographed my will, and verified her surveillance device. She had done it with the composure of someone picking up groceries. I sat in the tunnel staring at the empty kitchen on the screen. The vitamin bottle sat on the counter, innocent and ordinary. The chandelier hung above the dining table, crystals catching the morning light. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, from something older and heavier than fear. The kind of tremor that comes when the last thread of hope snaps and you feel the full weight of what you have lost. I had raised her. I had taught her to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk outside our old house. I had checked for monsters under her bed every night until she was 9. I had driven that Mustang into the driveway on her 16th birthday and caught her when she leapt into my arms. And now I had watched her poison my wife's medication without flinching. I pressed my palms flat against the folding table until the shaking stopped. Then I opened the spiral notebook and wrote. Saturday, 10:07 to 10:24, 17 minutes. Caroline entered house alone. Swapped vitamin capsules, photographed estate documents including current will. Checked chandelier microphone. Departed. No hesitation. No signs of stress. Highly practiced behavior pattern. This is not the first time. I closed the notebook. Looked at the camera feed one more time. The kitchen counter. The vitamin bottle. The chandelier. 17 minutes. That is how long it takes to betray everything. Saturday night, 11:41. I had been underground for almost 3 days. My back ached from the folding chair. My eyes burned from 6 camera feeds on a flickering laptop screen. Eugene had dropped a thermos of black coffee and 2 ham sandwiches through the garden shed hatch at sundown. The coffee was bitter. The sandwiches were perfect. That man could not brew a decent cup to save his life, but he made a sandwich like an artist. I was halfway through the second sandwich when the garden camera triggered. 2 figures. Same gait, same azalea path. Caroline first, Nathan 3 steps behind carrying a black duffel bag. They moved faster than Thursday night. Less caution, more confidence. The bait had worked. They believed I was in Charleston and the will was changing Monday. People running out of time make noise. They entered through the cellar door. I plugged my headphones into the laptop and switched to the chandelier microphone feed. Here is what Nathan did not know. His device transmitted on a standard 433 MHz frequency, the same one used by 90% of commercial surveillance equipment. Any first-year tech at the Savannah precinct could intercept that signal with a $20 SDR dongle and free software. Nathan was a corporate cybersecurity man. Firewalls and encryption. He thought in digital. But his microphone was analog, broadcasting unencrypted to a receiver he had hidden somewhere in the neighborhood. I did not need to find his receiver. I just needed to listen on the same frequency. It was like tapping into a radio station. The man who built walls around servers left his front door wide open on a technology older than both of us. The audio was crisp. Studio crisp. Caroline spoke first. He changed the will. Everything goes to Diane. We have until Monday. Through the kitchen camera, I watched Nathan unzip the duffel, pull out a laptop and 2 burner phones. The kind you buy at a gas station for $20 and throw away when the job is done. I had seized hundreds during my career. They always meant the same thing. The vitamin schedule is back on track, Caroline said, flat as a line item on a quarterly report. New bottle placed, cabinet, second shelf. When the beneficiary returns, dosage continues on the original timeline. 6 to 8 weeks to completion. My daughter scheduled murder the way she scheduled foundation audits, Nathan typed. Offshore accounts are clean. 6 transfers cleared Thursday. Once the audit cycle resets in January, the subsidiary accounts dissolve. No trail. Total disbursement? 1.7 million, give or take. I had estimated 1.5. My daughter was more thorough than I thought. Caroline pulled out a chair, sat down, folded her hands on the table. The same gesture Rose used to make before saying something serious. There is an item I have never disclosed, she said, regarding the original beneficiary. The cause of death was not organ failure. Nathan stopped typing. Thallium sulfate, Caroline continued, eyes on her own folded hands, the way she looked at spreadsheets during board meetings. Administered in controlled microdoses over 14 months. 0.3 milligrams daily, introduced into her morning tea. Symptom onset after 9 weeks. Fatigue, nausea, renal decline, hepatic compromise. No toxicology screen was requested because the progression was consistent with natural deterioration. She checked her phone, put it face down. I was 31. The original beneficiary had amended her estate plan to a 50-50 split between me and the foundation. That was not the agreed arrangement. She altered the terms unilaterally. Nathan's mouth opened. His left hand moved away from the keyboard. Not the reactions of a man who knew. The reactions of a man who had married a stranger. Rose, he said quietly. You killed Rose. I resolved an asset distribution conflict. Caroline stood, straightened her blouse. The resolution was effective. He redirected everything into the foundation, appointed me treasurer, never audited the accounts. If the current spouse had not begun reviewing quarterly reports, no corrective action would be necessary. She pushed the chair back in. If we suspend operations, the current spouse talks. If she talks, they petition for exhumation. If they exhume, they find thallium deposits in bone tissue. That is not 6 to 8 years, Nathan. That is life without parole. The cellar door groaned. Clicked. Gone. The headphones fed nothing now, except the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the hallway clock. I looked down at my right hand. The aluminum water bottle I had been holding was crushed inward, the metal folded over itself. My knuckles were white. The joint of my ring finger throbbed with a sharp, hot pain. I did not remember squeezing. I did not remember anything except Caroline's voice listing the method that killed my wife, the way she would list expenses on a tax return. 0.3 milligrams. 14 months. Morning tea. Rose. My Rose. The woman who squeezed my hand 3 times under the dinner table. Once for I, once for love, once for you. And my daughter called it resolving an asset distribution conflict. I pulled the headphones out, pressed my back against the wall, closed my eyes. I would bring her down, not as a father, as an inspector. Sunday morning, 6:14. I had not slept. The tunnel smelled like old brick and cold coffee. Rose's album sat closed on the folding table next to the laptop. I had not opened it since last night. I was not sure I could look at her face yet, without hearing Caroline's voice say 0.3 milligrams, in the same tone a person uses to read a grocery receipt. At 6:30, I climbed out through the garden shed hatch. The Savannah sky was the color of wet cement. Fog sat low over the azalea hedge. I crossed the back lawn and stopped at the property line fence. Eugene Hartwell was already there. Standing on his side in a flannel robe and rubber boots, holding a watering can over a row of rosemary that did not need watering. 78 years old. Retired electrical engineer. The man had spent 40 years designing transformer systems for Georgia Power and could still wire a house blindfolded. He was also the worst liar I had ever met, which is exactly why I trusted him. "You look terrible," he said. "I have not slept in 3 days." That explains the face, does not explain the eyes. He set the watering can down. "What did you hear?" I told him everything. The vitamin replacement, the 1.7 million, the offshore accounts. And then I told him about Rose, about the thallium, about 14 months of microdoses in her morning tea, about my daughter describing the murder of my wife the way a treasurer files a quarterly expense report. Eugene did not interrupt. He stood with both hands on the fence post, his knuckles going white, the same way mine had around that water bottle. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. A mockingbird sang from somewhere in the magnolia tree. Inappropriate, I thought. Nothing should be singing right now. "How do you want to handle this?" he said. Not a question, a commitment. By the book. Evidence first, arrest second. No mistakes. "Frank, you are not a cop anymore." "No, but I know how to build a case that a cop cannot ignore." Eugene scratched the back of his neck. "So what you are telling me is that you, a 71-year-old man with bad knees, have been living in a Civil War tunnel for 4 days, eating granola bars and watching your daughter on a laptop. And now you want me, a 78-year-old man with a hearing aid I refuse to wear, to help you take down a poisoner and a cybersecurity expert." That is an accurate summary. Good Lord, Frank. If Rose could see us right now, she would either be proud or she would call the both of us idiots. She would do both. In that order. He almost smiled. Then the smile died because we both remembered why we were standing at this fence. I laid out what I had. 6 camera feeds with timestamps. Audio recordings from the chandelier microphone captured through the SDR intercept. The vitamin bottle with thallium residue, secured by Dr. Marsh. Foundation bank records showing 6 unauthorized subsidiary accounts, and a recorded confession of first-degree murder. "That is enough to put her away for 3 lifetimes, Eugene said. "It is enough to start. But Caroline said something last night that changed the math. If they exhume Rose, they find thallium in the bone tissue. That means we need an exhumation order, a judge. And I am a retired police chief asking a judge to dig up his own wife, based on evidence gathered through a tunnel nobody knew existed. When you put it that way, it sounds like a bad movie, which is why I need Detective Ray Coleman, Chatham County Major Crimes. He was a rookie when I was chief. He is thorough, honest, and owes me nothing." Eugene nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Eyes on the house when I am not in the tunnel. Nathan comes through the back gate between 11 and midnight. I need to know if the pattern changes. Logged. Time in, time out. Who? Which door? Written on paper." Eugene pulled a small notebook from his robe pocket. Black marble cover. The kind you buy at a drugstore for $2. He held it up. "I started Tuesday," he said. 3 nights of flashlight entries. Dates, times, descriptions. 3 nights of logs. Before I had asked. Before I had told him anything. 40 years of engineering had taught him that you do not wait for the system to fail. You monitor it until you understand the pattern. "Monday. I need to bring Coleman into the house through the tunnel. I need the shed hatch oiled and someone watching the street." Eugene picked up his watering can, poured the last of the water over the rosemary. "I will oil the hatch tonight," he said. "And Frank, yes, we are going to get her. You know that, right?" I did not answer. Because getting her meant losing her. And I was not ready to say that out loud yet. Sunday afternoon, 1:47. Eugene called on the burner phone. "Man on your porch, toolbox, polo shirt, Torres Electrical. He's been sitting in his truck for 20 minutes. Almost drove away twice." I switched to the front porch camera. Late 30s, work boots, a crumpled invoice in one hand. He knocked twice, waited, then looked over his shoulder the way people do when they are not sure they want to be where they are. I had seen that look 1,000 times. On witnesses, on informants, on people standing outside my office at the precinct, trying to decide whether telling the truth was worth the cost. I was not going to walk out the front door. I was supposed to be in Charleston. One neighbor seeing my face and mentioning it to anyone would unravel 3 days of work. I called Eugene back. Bring him around to your back patio. Tell him you are my neighbor and I asked you to handle any visitors while I am away. Do not tell him anything else. 7 minutes later, I climbed out through the shed hatch, crossed through the gap in the hedge that connected our 2 backyards, and sat down across from Sam Torres at Eugene's patio table. Eugene went inside, closed the door, left us alone. Sam Torres looked at me and knew immediately. Not because I told him, because a man who carries guilt recognizes authority the way a compass finds north. Mr. Aldridge, he said, how did you know I was not in Charleston? Your truck is in the garage. I could see it through the side window when I walked up. I came last Sunday too, and the Sunday before that. Both times I sat in my truck and drove away. Today your truck was there, and I decided if I left again, I would never come back. 3 Sundays. He had been circling this moment for 3 weeks. That changed everything about how I read him. This was not impulse. This was a man who had fought himself and lost to his own conscience. Tell me, I said. He started, stopped, picked up the toolbox from beside his chair and set it on his lap like a shield. Looked at the hedge, then at his truck parked on the street, then at the patio gate. Measuring distance, calculating escape. You drove here 3 Sundays in a row, I said. That means you already made your decision. The hardest part is done. His shoulders dropped 1 inch. That was enough. Sam Torres talked. He talked the way a man talks when he has been carrying something too heavy, and his arms have finally given out. Short, direct sentences. No drama, no excuses. Caroline had hired him 3 months ago. Cash. $4,000 for a 2-hour installation. She said it was a high-sensitivity smoke detector with audio monitoring for her elderly father's safety. He knew the price was wrong. A smoke detector installation runs $300, maybe $400. $4,000 for 2 hours meant the job was not what she described. He knew this. He took it anyway because his daughter Lily's immunotherapy bill arrived that week, and insurance had denied the claim for the 3rd time. Lily was 9. His son Jake was 7. Their mother left when Lily was diagnosed. I am not telling you this for sympathy, he said. I am telling you because it is the reason I lied to myself. 6 weeks ago, he saw a news segment about surveillance equipment in a domestic abuse case in Florida. Same device model, same frequency. He looked up the specs on the unit he had installed in my chandelier. Long-range audio transmitter, 40-foot pickup radius. Not a smoke detector. Not even close. He pulled the invoice from his pocket. Caroline's handwriting. Her phone number. Cash payment noted at the bottom. He had kept it because something felt wrong from the first day, and he could not make himself throw it away. Will you testify? I said. Under oath. Your name on the record. His jaw tightened. She has my address, my phone number. I have 2 kids. I know. Then you know what I am risking. I do, and I will make sure they are safe. I have a colleague from my years at the precinct, retired U.S. Marshal. He lives 40 minutes outside the city in a gated property. Your kids will stay there with you until this is resolved. Not next door, not down the street. 40 minutes away behind a fence with a man who spent 30 years protecting witnesses for a living. Sam looked at the invoice on the table, then at me, then at the truck where I imagine Lily and Jake were waiting, because a man does not bring his children along when he plans to run. Yes, he said. I will testify. I shook his hand, took the invoice, watched him drive away at 2:31. Then I sat at Eugene's patio table for a long time, holding Caroline's handwriting in my hand. The same handwriting I watched her develop from crooked kindergarten letters to the sharp, efficient script she used on foundation documents. I folded it carefully, put it in my shirt pocket, right side, over my heart, next to the place where it hurt the most. Sunday night, 10:26. I was back in the tunnel. The laptop hummed on the folding table. 6 feeds, 6 angles. The house above me was dark, except for the hallway light that I always left on, the one Diane called wasteful and I called necessary. Old habit from 32 years of walking through crime scenes. You always leave a light on so you can see what moves through it. At 10:31, the garden camera triggered. Caroline and Nathan. 3rd night in a row. Same gate. But tonight Nathan carried a canvas bag instead of the duffel, and the shape inside was wrong. Not rectangular like a laptop. Irregular. Angular. Tools. I put on the headphones. Switched to the chandelier feed. The audio came through clean, the same 433 megahertz signal Nathan never thought to encrypt. They moved through the kitchen without speaking. Nathan set the bag on the hallway floor at the base of the main staircase. I switched to the hallway camera. He knelt, unzipped the bag, pulled out a cordless drill with the bit already attached, a small pry bar, a tube of wood-colored epoxy, and a flashlight with a red filter. Red light, the kind that preserves night vision and does not bleed through windows. This man had planned this the way he planned network breaches. Methodical, layered, patient. Caroline stood 3 steps behind him, arms crossed, watching the front door. Steps 3 and 7, she said. Those are the ones he uses every time. He grabs the railing at 3 and shifts his weight at 7. I watched him for 2 months. 2 months. My daughter had been studying the way I climb my own staircase for 2 months, counting which steps I lean on, noting where my 71-year-old knees compensate, mapping my body's weaknesses the way a structural engineer maps load-bearing failures. Nathan positioned the drill against the underside of the 3rd step. He worked quietly, removed 2 of the 4 support screws, then used the pry bar to loosen the bracket that held the step to the stringer. He left 2 screws in place, just enough to hold the step under normal appearance, not enough to hold the weight of a man. He moved to step 7 and repeated the process. Drill, pry bar, 2 screws out, bracket loosened, epoxy applied along the seam to mask the gap. From above, the staircase would look untouched. From below, 2 steps were waiting to collapse under 180 pounds of retired police chief. Through the headphones, I heard Caroline speak again. The main security system? Disabled Thursday, Nathan said. I rerouted the alert signal to a dead mailbox. The monitoring company thinks the system is online. It is not. No alarm, no record, no response. He did not know about my 6 cameras. He had disabled the commercial system that I had installed 3 years ago, the one with the logo on the front door sticker. He thought that was everything. A cybersecurity consultant who defeated the digital lock and never considered that someone might be watching through an analog eye hidden inside a smoke detector. Caroline checked her phone. Monday. He told the lawyer the will signing is at noon. He will come down the stairs between 11 and 11:30. He always gets dressed an hour before any appointment. When the step gives, he falls forward, Nathan said, still kneeling. The angle from step 7 puts his head at the level of the landing post. Blunt force. The medical examiner will see a 71-year-old man who slipped on old stairs in an old house. Caroline uncrossed her arms. And Diane? Still missing. Once he is gone, we petition the court as next of kin. The foundation transfers to your name within 60 days. The offshore accounts stay clean. Nobody asks questions about a dead man's charity. Nathan zipped the bag, stood, checked both steps by pressing his palm flat against each surface. Satisfied. They left through the cellar door at 11:03. I sat in the tunnel and replayed the audio twice, then a third time. I wanted to make sure I had not misheard. I had not. My daughter had studied my staircase for 2 months, identified the exact steps where my aging body was most vulnerable, and scheduled my death for Monday at 11:30. I called Eugene on the burner. They sabotaged steps 3 and 7, I said. Monday noon is the target. Good Lord. I need Ray Coleman in this house by 10 a.m. Monday. Through the tunnel. You watch the street. Frank, are you all right? I looked at the screen. The hallway camera showed the staircase. It looked the same as it had for 20 years. Same wood, same railing, same runner carpet that Rose had picked out from the catalog in 1998 because she liked the burgundy pattern. No, I said. But I will be. I closed the laptop. Tomorrow was Monday. Monday morning, 7:12. I had slept 90 minutes. Not because I could not sleep longer, because 90 minutes was all I allowed myself. I splashed tunnel water on my face, changed into the clean shirt Eugene had dropped through the hatch at dawn, and opened the laptop. 6 feeds, 6 angles. The hallway camera showed the staircase. Same burgundy runner, same 2 steps waiting to break under my weight. At 7:40, I picked up the burner phone. My personal phone was powered off and wrapped in a flannel shirt at the bottom of my bag. It had been off since Wednesday. If Caroline or Nathan were monitoring my number, they would see no signal, no location ping, nothing inconsistent with a man 3 hours away in Charleston. I dialed Coleman from the burner. He would not recognize the number, so I let it ring once, hung up, then called again. An old signal from the precinct days. 1 ring, then callback means it is someone you trained with. Ray picked up on the first ring the second time. Who is this? Ray, Frank Aldridge. I am calling from a clean line. Chief, been 4 years. I need you at my property by 9:30. Back entrance through the garden shed. There is a hatch under the workbench that leads to a tunnel. Do not come through the front. Do not tell dispatch. Bring your recorder and your patience. You will need both. Silence. 5 seconds. Then the question I expected from a detective I had trained properly. Give me one reason, Chief. One reason to go off the books on a Monday morning. My daughter murdered my wife. I have the recorded confession, 6 camera feeds, a cooperating witness, and she is coming to kill me at 11:30 today. 3 seconds of silence. 9:30, garden shed. I will be there. That was enough for Ray. Not because he was reckless, because he knew the difference between a man crying wolf and a man who had spent 32 years never once making a call he could not back up. At 8:20, Eugene texted the burner. We had agreed on texts only during daylight to avoid the sound of a phone call carrying through the shed walls. Short messages, no names. He texted from his kitchen, curtains drawn, watching through a gap he had cut in the fabric Wednesday night. Gray sedan, slow pass, 1 occupant, east. Nathan, surveillance run. Checking whether the house looked undisturbed before the main event. Predictable. At 9:15, my personal phone would have received Caroline's call, but it was off. She would hear voicemail. She would leave a message about groceries or weather or love. I would retrieve it later as evidence. For now, Silence was safer than any recording. At 9:28, Eugene texted. Tall, gray jacket, shed, Coleman. I heard the hatch open above me. The ladder creaked. Ray Coleman descended into the tunnel and stood in the dim light looking at the folding table, the laptop, the 6 camera feeds, the stacked evidence folders, the brick walls, and a 71-year-old man who had been living underground for 5 days. Chief, he said, you look like hell. Sit down, Ray. This will take a while. I had organized the evidence into a numbered sequence. 14 items. Folder 1 through 14, each labeled, each containing printed screenshots, timestamps, and notes. I had prepared this at 4 a.m. because I knew the one thing that could ruin this case was not lack of evidence. It was presentation. A detective who receives a disorganized pile of claims from a civilian shuts down. A detective who receives a numbered case file from a former chief of police listens. I walked him through it methodically. Not the full story. The evidence chain. Folder 1, Eugene's handwritten surveillance log. Folder 2, photographs of the lock scratches. Folder 3, Dr. Marsh's thallium report. 4 through 9, camera feed screenshots with timestamps. Folder 10, the SDR audio intercept files. 11, Sam Torres's signed work order. 12, Foundation bank records. 13, the staircase sabotage footage from last night. 14, the audio confession. I played the confession last. 53 seconds of Caroline's voice, 0.3 milligrams, 14 months. Resolved an asset distribution conflict. Ray listened with his hands flat on his knees. When it ended, he exhaled through his nose and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Rose gave me peach preserves, he said quietly. Both Christmas parties. My wife still talks about them. Then the detective took over. The surveillance and audio intercept. You are a private citizen on your own property, using your own equipment. Georgia is a one-party consent state for recordings on your premises. The SDR intercept of an unencrypted analog signal on a standard frequency is a gray area. But the confession was captured by a device installed illegally in your home without your knowledge. That makes it fruit of their crime, not yours. A good prosecutor can argue admissibility. It is not perfect, but it is workable. He pulled out his recorder, set it on the table. Detective Ray Coleman, Chatham County Major Crimes. Case number pending. Monday, November 18th. Location? Private residence, retired Chief Frank Aldridge. I am conducting a preliminary intake based on evidence presented by the complainant. He looked at me, nodded. The recorder's red light blinked in the tunnel darkness. Steady. Patient. We had 90 minutes until 11:30. Monday, 11:08. Ray Coleman stood at the tunnel entrance beneath the garden shed, his badge clipped inside his jacket, his hand resting on his service weapon. 2 uniformed officers waited behind him. He had called them in at 10:45 through a secure channel. No dispatch, no radio. Direct phone calls to men he trusted. They had entered through Eugene's backyard, through the hedge gap, and down the hatch without a single footstep on my property's front side. Eugene watched the street from his kitchen window. Curtain gap. Burner phone in hand. I stood at the laptop in the tunnel, all 6 feeds running. The house above us was silent. The hallway camera showed the staircase, steps 3 and 7. Waiting. At 11:14, Eugene texted, White SUV. Her. Pulling into your driveway. Caroline. On schedule. She expected me to come down those stairs in 16 minutes, grab the railing at step 3, shift my weight at step 7, and fall forward into the landing post. She expected to find me at the bottom. Broken. Quiet. An old man in an old house on old stairs. At 11:19, the front door opened. The foyer camera caught her. Cream blouse, dark slacks, hair pulled back tight. She carried a brown paper bag. Groceries. The same prop from the voicemail she had left yesterday. She set the bag on the kitchen counter, took out a container of soup and a loaf of bread, and arranged them neatly beside the stove. Stage dressing. Evidence of a loving daughter who came to check on her father and found him at the bottom of the stairs. She checked her phone, looked up at the chandelier. That same small, private smile. At 11:23, she walked to the base of the staircase and looked up, waiting, listening for movement on the second floor, for the sound of a 71-year-old man getting dressed for a noon appointment that did not exist. She waited 4 minutes. Then she called my personal phone. It rang upstairs in the bedroom where I had placed it that morning, powered on for the first time in 5 days, set on the nightstand with the volume at maximum. I had climbed up through the tunnel's secondary exit in the upstairs linen closet at 10:30 and placed it there specifically for this moment. A ringing phone in an empty bedroom. Bait inside bait. The phone rang 6 times. Voicemail. Caroline looked at the staircase, looked at her phone, called again. 6 rings. Voicemail. She typed a text. I could not see the screen from the camera angle, but I watched her thumbs move. Fast. Impatient. Then she put the phone away and stood perfectly still at the base of the stairs, staring upward with an expression I will remember until the day I join Rose, wherever she is. Anticipation. She was waiting for me to die the way someone waits for a delivery. At 11:31, she turned and walked toward the kitchen. She was recalculating. I could see it in her posture, the slight tilt of her head, the way her fingers tapped against her thigh. Nathan's work on the staircase was supposed to be triggered by now. Something was wrong with her schedule, and she did not yet understand what. I nodded at Coleman. We moved. Coleman went up through the linen closet exit. I followed. The 2 officers came up behind us. We stepped into the upstairs hallway on carpet, no sound, and walked to the top of the staircase. Caroline was in the kitchen with her back to the hallway, pouring water into a glass from the tap. Calm, patient, waiting for Plan B to form in her mind. Caroline, I said. She turned. The glass stayed in her hand. Her face did not change. No shock, no fear, just a rapid, silent calculation behind her eyes. I had interrogated hundreds of people. I knew the difference between surprise and recalibration. My daughter was not surprised. She was updating her variables. Her eyes moved from me to Coleman, to the badge, to the 2 uniforms, to the staircase behind us that I had just walked past without touching steps 3 or 7. "Dad," she said, "you are home early." Coleman stepped forward. Caroline Aldridge Webb. I am Detective Ray Coleman, Chatham County Major Crimes. You are under arrest for the murder of Rose Aldridge, the attempted murder of Diane Aldridge, conspiracy to commit murder of Frank Aldridge, embezzlement of funds from the Rose Aldridge Hope Foundation, and criminal surveillance. You have the right to remain silent. She set the glass on the counter. Carefully. No spill. No tremor. She placed her hands in front of her, wrists together, before Coleman reached for the handcuffs. She had already decided how this would look. Controlled. Dignified. A woman being wrongly accused. A jury image already forming in her mind. As Coleman secured the cuffs, she looked at me. Directly. Steady. "You were in the tunnel," she said, not a question. "Since Wednesday." Something moved behind her eyes. The smallest fracture in the glass. Not guilt. Not regret. Recognition. She had underestimated me, and that bothered her more than the handcuffs. "Rose's tunnel," she said quietly. "She always said the house had secrets." Coleman led her toward the front door. She walked with her back straight, her steps even, her chin level. The same posture she had when she was 16, and I grounded her for sneaking out, and she walked to her room without a single word of protest, because silence was her weapon even then. At the door, she stopped, looked back at me one more time. I wanted her to say something human, something that proved the girl in the photo album still existed somewhere inside the woman in handcuffs. I wanted her to cry, to apologize, to say Mom's name with something other than clinical detachment. She said nothing. She turned and walked out. The front door closed. I stood in the kitchen where Rose used to make peach cobbler every Sunday. The soup Caroline had brought sat on the counter. The bread. The stage dressing of a daughter who loved her father. I picked up the glass she had set down. Still full. Still cold. Her fingerprints on the surface. I poured the water into the sink and watched it drain. The trial began 9 weeks later, January. Savannah in winter has a particular kind of cold, not sharp like the north. Damp. The kind that sits in your joints and reminds you of every year you have lived. I was 71 years and 9 weeks older than the man who had crawled into a tunnel on a Wednesday night, and I felt every single day of it. Chatham County Superior Court, Courtroom 4. Judge Margaret Hale presiding. The gallery was full every morning by 8:15. Reporters from Savannah, Atlanta, Jacksonville. 2 national outlets by the second week. The story had everything they wanted. A retired police chief, a murdered wife, a poisoned second wife, a daughter in handcuffs. They called it the Aldridge House case. I called it the worst thing that ever happened to my family. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Neil Brennan. 44 years old, methodical. Quiet voice that made the jury lean forward to listen, which meant they heard every word twice. He built the case the way I had built the evidence folders, one piece at a time, numbered, dated, connected. Day 1. Dr. Henry Marsh took the stand. He presented the thallium results from Diane's blood panel. He explained the dosage pattern. He explained what 0.3 milligrams per day does to a human body over 14 months. He used the phrase cumulative organ degradation, and a woman in the second row of the jury closed her eyes. Day 3. The exhumation results. Rose's remains had been exhumed 2 weeks after Caroline's arrest, pursuant to a court order obtained by Coleman. The forensic toxicologist, Dr. Patricia Ewan, testified that thallium sulfate was present in Rose's femoral bone tissue, hair follicles, and fingernail samples at concentrations consistent with prolonged, low-dose exposure over 12 to 16 months. She presented the lab reports on a projector screen, numbers, charts. The chemistry of how my wife was taken from me, 1 milligram at a time. I sat in the third row behind the prosecution table. Diane sat next to me. She held my hand. I did not squeeze 3 times. That belonged to Rose. Day 5. Sam Torres. He walked to the witness stand in a pressed shirt that was too big in the shoulders. His hands were steady. He described the installation, the $4,000 cash payment, the work order with Caroline's handwriting. He described the moment 6 weeks later when he realized what he had installed. And he described driving to my house 3 Sundays in a row before finding the courage to knock. Brennan asked him why he came forward. "Because my daughter is 9, Sam said, and I could not look her in the eye anymore." The jury foreman wrote something down. I watched his pen move. In 32 years, I learned that when a juror writes during testimony, the witness has reached them. Day 7. The audio. Brennan played Caroline's confession through the courtroom speakers. 53 seconds. The gallery went silent, in a way I had only experienced once before. At Rose's funeral, when the minister asked for a moment of reflection, and the entire church stopped breathing.
0.3 milligrams daily. Morning tea.
14 months. Resolved an asset distribution conflict. When the recording ended, 3 jurors were looking at Caroline. She sat at the defense table in a navy blazer, her hair pulled back, her hands folded on the table. The same posture, the same interlocked fingers. She did not react. She looked at the judge's bench the way she looked at spreadsheets. Day 9. The defense. Caroline's attorney, a private hire from Atlanta named Martin Cross, argued that the audio was obtained through unauthorized surveillance and should be inadmissible. Judge Hale reviewed Coleman's filing, the precedent on recordings captured by illegally installed devices on private property without the homeowner's consent, and the Georgia one-party consent statute. She ruled the recording admissible. Cross had nothing else. The evidence was a wall with no doors. Caroline did not testify. She sat through 9 days of trial without speaking a single word in her own defense. Nathan Webb took a plea on day 6. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, criminal surveillance, embezzlement. 25 years, federal facility, no parole eligibility for 15. He testified against Caroline in exchange for the plea. He described the offshore accounts, the staircase sabotage, the microphone installation plan. He confirmed that Saturday night was the first time Caroline told him about Rose. His voice cracked when he said her name. I did not feel sorry for him, but I believed him. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 11 minutes. Guilty. All counts. Murder in the first degree for Rose Aldridge. Attempted murder for Diane Aldridge. Conspiracy to commit murder for Frank Aldridge. Embezzlement. Criminal surveillance. 5 counts. 5 guilty verdicts read aloud in a courtroom where the only sound between each one was the court reporter's keys. Judge Hale scheduled sentencing for February. Life without the possibility of parole. Caroline stood when the sentence was read. Hands clasped in front of her, back straight. She looked at Judge Hale the way she had looked at the chandelier. That small, private smile. As if the outcome was an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. The bailiff led her out through the side door. She did not look back at me. Not once. Not during the verdict. Not during sentencing. Not as the door closed behind her. I gave a victim impact statement before sentencing. I will not write what I said here. Some words belong only to the room where they are spoken and the people who carry them out. Diane drove me home. We did not speak for 20 minutes. Then she said, "The azaleas need trimming." I laughed. For the first time in 11 weeks, I laughed. Because Diane understood something that prosecutors and reporters and jurors never could. That after the worst thing in your life, someone still has to trim the azaleas. 6 months later, a Sunday in May, the staircase had been rebuilt. A carpenter from Tybee Island named Holt did the work in 3 days. He replaced every step, not just 3 and 7. I told him the wood was old and I wanted it done right. He did not ask questions. He sanded each tread by hand and sealed them with the same walnut stain Rose had chosen in 1992. When he finished, I walked up and down twice. The stairs held. They felt like mine again. Diane had moved back in February. She came home from Dr. Marsh's private clinic 11 pounds lighter and with a tremor in her left hand that the neurologist said might never fully go away. Thallium leaves marks that outlast the poison. She did not complain about the tremor. She complained about the kitchen faucet dripping and the fact that I had let the herb garden go to ruin while she was gone. I fixed the faucet that afternoon. The herb garden took longer. Eugene came over every morning at 7:30. He brought his own coffee because he still believed mine was too weak. And I let him believe it because the argument had become a ritual, and rituals were the only architecture holding my days together. We sat on the back porch in the 2 Adirondack chairs that Rose had ordered from a catalog in 2003. Eugene talked about transformer specifications and property taxes and the mockingbird that had nested in his magnolia tree for the 4th consecutive year. I listened. Sometimes I talked. Mostly, I listened. Listening was easier than remembering. Sam Torres brought Lily and Jake over on the 2nd Sunday in March. First visit since the trial. The kids ran through the back garden chasing a lizard, while Sam sat at the kitchen table and drank sweet tea and said nothing for 10 minutes. Then he told me the immunotherapy was working. Lily's numbers were stable for the first time in 2 years. His voice was steady when he said it, but his hands wrapped around the glass the way a man holds something precious that he is afraid to drop. I hired Sam to rewire the tunnel lighting. Not because it needed rewiring, because he needed the work and I needed someone in that tunnel who would replace the memory of what I had heard down there with the sound of a drill and a man whistling while his daughter played in the garden above. The foundation was restructured in April. New board, new treasurer, independent audit completed. The $1.7 million was unrecoverable. Offshore accounts dissolved before the FBI could freeze them. Neil Brennan told me the money was gone and I should make peace with it. I did not make peace with it. But I let it go, which is a different thing entirely. I renamed the foundation. It was no longer the Rose Aldridge Hope Foundation. It was the Rose Aldridge Family Trust. Because Rose never cared about hope as an abstraction. She cared about family as a practice. Every Sunday, every cobbler, every 3 squeezes under the table. Which brings me to this Sunday in May. Diane was in the kitchen. She had Rose's recipe card propped against the mixer. The card was stained and creased, and the ink had faded in the corners, but every measurement was still legible. Rose had written it in her careful schoolteacher print. 2 cups of sliced peaches, 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of whole milk, 1 stick of butter melted, a pinch of cinnamon that Rose always said was the difference between a good cobbler and the right cobbler. Diane followed the recipe exactly. She did not try to improve it. She did not add anything or subtract anything. She made it the way Rose made it, because some things are not meant to be reinvented. They are meant to be continued. Eugene arrived at noon with a bottle of lemonade and a bag of pecans from his tree. Sam came at 12:30 with Lily and Jake. Lily wore a yellow dress and carried a drawing she had made of the house, with the magnolia tree twice as tall as the roof and a sun with a face in the corner. She gave it to me at the front door and said, "This is for your refrigerator, Mr. Aldridge." It is still there. We ate on the back porch. 5 chairs. The 2 Adirondacks for me and Eugene. 3 kitchen chairs that Diane brought out for herself, Sam, and the kids. Lily sat between Sam and me. Jake sat on the porch steps, eating cobbler with his hands, until Diane gave him a fork and a look that could have stopped a freight train. The cobbler was not identical to Rose's. The peaches were slightly firmer. The crust was a shade darker. But it was close. It was close enough to make me set my fork down for a moment and look at the magnolia tree, and the garden, and the hedge that connected my yard to Eugene's, and feel something I had not felt since a Wednesday night in November, when I climbed down a ladder into a tunnel beneath my own house. Home. After lunch, Diane collected the plates. Eugene argued about the best method for storing pecans. Sam pushed Lily on the tire swing that had hung from the oak tree since before Caroline was born. Jake fell asleep on the porch with cobbler on his chin. I sat in the Adirondack chair and held Rose's album in my lap. I opened it for the first time since the tunnel. The photographs were the same. Rose in the green dress, Caroline at 4 with pneumonia, the cherry red Mustang, Christmas 1998. Rose laughing at something I could never remember. I turned to the last page. It was blank. Rose had always said she was saving it for something worth remembering. I took Lily's drawing from the refrigerator and placed it on that page. Then I closed the album, held it against my chest, and squeezed 3 times. Once for I, once for love, once for you. I am 72 now. My birthday was last Tuesday. Diane made a lemon cake because she said chocolate was bad for my blood pressure, and I said lemon was bad for my dignity. And Eugene said both of us were bad for his patience. We ate the cake on the back porch. Lily put a candle in the shape of the number 7 on one side, and a candle in the shape of the number 2 on the other, and told me to make a wish. I wished for exactly what I already had, which is either the wisest or the laziest kind of wish a man can make. I did not tell this story because I wanted sympathy. I do not need it. I told it because somewhere, right now, someone listening to this is sitting in a quiet house with a feeling in their gut that something is not right. A door that was locked is now unlocked. A bill that does not add up. A conversation that ended too quickly. A smile that arrived a half-second too late. Trust that feeling. I almost did not. I was a man who spent 32 years reading crime scenes, and I almost ignored the scratches on my own cellar lock because I did not want to believe that the person holding the copied key was the same person I taught to ride a bicycle on Abercorn Street when she was 6 years old. I learned 5 things in that tunnel beneath my house. I did not learn them from a book or a sermon or a training manual. I learned them from brick walls and camera feeds and the sound of my daughter's voice describing the murder of my wife in the language of quarterly financial reports. The first thing I learned is that evil does not look like evil. It looks like a cream blouse and dark slacks and a brown paper bag of groceries. It looks like a woman who brings vitamins to her stepmother and calls her father to say, "Love you." It looks normal. It always looks normal. The moment you expect evil to announce itself is the moment it has already won. The second thing I learned is that the people who save you are rarely the people you expect. A 78-year-old neighbor who waters rosemary he does not need. A single father who drove to a stranger's house 3 Sundays in a row because his 9-year-old daughter made him too ashamed to keep a secret. A detective who climbed into a tunnel on a Monday morning because he trusted the man who trained him. Nobody in this story wore a cape. They wore flannel robes and pressed shirts that were too big in the shoulders and gray jackets with a badge clipped inside. The third thing I learned is that the truth does not care about your feelings. I wanted Caroline to be innocent. I wanted the scratches on the lock to be a raccoon or a loose hinge or anything other than what they were. The truth waited for me in the tunnel the way it always waits. Patient, quiet, uninterested in whether you are ready to hear it. The fourth thing I learned is that grief and justice can exist in the same hand. I held Rose's album against my chest while I listened to the evidence that would put my daughter in prison for the rest of her life. I grieved for Rose. I grieved for Caroline. I grieved for the 4-year-old girl with pneumonia who needed her father to stay awake for 3 nights, and the 37-year-old woman who calculated his death between steps 3 and 7. They are the same person. That is the part no one tells you. The child you loved and the monster you caught share the same face. And you do not get to choose which one you see when you close your eyes. The fifth thing I learned is that family is not who shares your blood. Family is who shows up. Eugene showed up with bad coffee and a marble notebook and a watering can. Sam showed up with a crumpled invoice and shaking hands and the courage of a man who could not lie to a 9-year-old anymore. Diane showed up with a tremor in her left hand and Rose's recipe card and the sentence, "The azaleas need trimming," which is the most loving thing anyone has ever said to me because it meant life was going to continue whether I was ready or not. Rose knew this. She always knew. That is why she squeezed my hand 3 times under the table instead of saying the words out loud. Because some things are too important for language. They have to be felt, pressed into the skin. One for I, one for love, one for you. If this story meant something to you, I am glad. If you are going through something similar, I am sorry. If you are sitting in a quiet house right now with a feeling in your gut that will not go away, do not ignore it. Open the door. Check the lock. Look at the people around you with the eyes of someone who loves them enough to see them clearly, even when clarity is the last thing you want. That is all I have. My name is Frank Aldridge. I am 72 years old. I live in a 120-year-old Victorian house in Savannah, Georgia, with my wife Diane, a rebuilt staircase, a tunnel I no longer need, and a refrigerator with a drawing by a 9-year-old girl who made the sun smile. Thank you for listening. And if you have someone you love, tell them. Do not squeeze their hand under the table and assume they know. Tell them. Say it out loud. Say it now. Because you do not know which Sunday is the last Sunday, and the cobbler gets cold faster than you think.